Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Once again, welcome to HAC TV. Hi, my name is Sam Pierre. I'm the executive director of the Haitian American Caucus, and I'm really excited to be here with you guys today. Just wanted to let you guys know this is a pre-recording um, event that we pre-recorded for your viewing pleasure. Welcome to HAC TV. Yes, welcome to HAC TV. I'm really excited to be here with you guys this Saturday morning. Today's program is sponsored by the Haitian American Caucus, PayPal, and EEP Law. EEP Law is our law firm partner for all of your needs. Just please feel free to reach out to EEP Law. We want to thank PayPal who's our social justice partner, who really believed in making sure that the community as a whole, understands that they care about our issues. And I'm very excited that one of the issues that we're going to talk about today is something that plagues the African American community a lot, and that's mental health. So I'm really excited about this program. We're going to have some fun. We're going to have some conversations with some special guests. And I really look forward to having you get something out of this program. Once again, my name is Sam Pierre. I'm the executive director of the Haitian American Caucus. We are a community development nonprofit organization whose mission is to provide Haitian communities around the world with access to information and resources to foster self-development and success. So I'm really excited, and let's jump right in. So we want to bring in our first guest for our mental health awareness Black History Month show. We want to bring in Josue Pierre. Josue Pierre, how are you, man?
Hey, Sam, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on HAC TV.
Thank you, man. Thank you. And it's always a pleasure to have you. We're really excited. This is a much needed conversation. And I'm very happy that you were able to give us some time and come here and talk to the audience about, how this impacts the community and how this impacts you. Real quick, 1 minute, Josh. Tell the community about who Josue Pierre is and what you've been up to.
So, my name is Josue Pierre, but you could call me Josh. I'm a sitting Democratic district leader in the Flatbush area. I've been a housing rights activist, community activist for well over 10 years, where we engage in civic education, getting people involved in the process of how decisions are made for them. And I am also the co-host of Sac Passe Brooklyn on Radio Panu every Sunday and every Wednesday.
Thank you, Josh. We appreciate it, man. And we're so happy to have you here. Let's bring on our second guest. We have Dr. Jennifer Charles, who is another. Hey, Dr. Jennifer, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you and have you back. Again, last week we had you on the COVID vaccines program. And I got to tell you, that was one of the most talked about shows that we've had on HAC TV. I got a lot of phone calls and emails about it, people who were on the fence. But after watching your show, a lot of people decided that they're actually going to move forward and even asked HAC for information on where they can go to get vaccinated. So I just wanted to say thank you for your work with HAC and the show that you guys had last week. It was amazing.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you so much for having me again. And I'm glad to hear that, because that's what it's about.
Absolutely.
Getting the community involved.
Let the new There you go. Let the new viewers know a little bit about who Dr. Jennifer Charles is really quick before we get started.
So my name is Dr. Jennifer Charles. I am a board certified anesthesiologist. I work in Manhattan, and that's pretty much it.
Well, wonderful, Dr. Charles. We appreciate you. We appreciate your time. We're going to jump right in, right? So as we know that there's been a global pandemic in our society, and it challenged us in many ways. So on Saturdays, HAC has our civic engagement programs, but we can't talk about being civically engaged if people are having issues around mental health, right? Mental health is something that we take extremely serious here at the Haitian American Caucus. we've been doing mental health programs since 2014. Dr. Jeff Gardier, who's America's psychologist, is our official mental health advisor here at HAC, and he's been doing programs, so many different programs with HAC around mental health, and he actually led the charge to help us destigmatize, going to counseling, and he's been such a hero. We just want to give a shout out to Dr. Jeff for all that you've done with us. So we've continued to talk about the impact of mental health in the Haitian community and how destigmatizing going to counseling is. So we know that COVID was crazy. HAC, actually, we lost 2 of our staffers this last year in 2020, John Ferdinand and Gibbs Seraphin, who was a director of workforce development. So we have felt the loss of, our 2 of our owns in 2020. And we all understand how that could impact families. People lost brothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, dads, rather. So the question really is, how do you how are we dealing with this, right? We're all professionals in the professional world, running around trying to navigate COVID. So my first question is, has COVID impacted your mental health? And if it did, what changed, right? Like, what did you first know? When did you first notice that there was something different about you? And if it did impact you, what really changed? So we'll start with you, Dr. Charles, and then we'll go to you, Josh.
Okay. So I think in the beginning of COVID-19, what ended up happening is, and I know you're familiar, Sam, is the first thing that happened is there became a change in the schedule, a shift change. So as an anesthesiologist, you are recruited to the ICU to basically serve as supplemental staff where you're taking care of extremely sick patients that require intubation and ventilation. One of the first things that I noticed was the schedule change. So where I work, it is a 7 a.m. job until early afternoon. What ended up happening is that we had to work from either 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So that in and of itself, that change in working schedule time started to cause fluctuations in my sleeping habit.
Right.
So I started having poor sleep hygiene, difficulty sleeping and difficulty staying asleep. Also, I noticed that, because I couldn't stay asleep, I would wake up a lot, very, very paranoid in the beginning, looking at the statistics, how many people were dying. I was just so glued to the news, how many people were infected, how many people were hospitalized at my particular location. But to answer your question, the first thing that I started noticing was poor sleep hygiene and complete utter obsession with COVID numbers. That's when I kind of realized that, okay, something is wrong with the way that I am handling this particular situation.
Wow, that's deep, and I totally agree. I remember, the briefings were every day. So, and every day the new, and the media, they would take it, and it's almost like it became sensationalized news, where the governor was having his briefing and then the president was having his briefing and they weren't getting along. So it was just like, so I do recall that, and you're 100% right. I can see how that can impact and affect you. Josh?
Well, as you know, Sam, I do a lot of work in the community in Flatbush. And first thing that happened in terms of COVID and the reality of COVID was that everything was shut down and people now had to stay inside of their homes. So being that normally out there engaged, it was just like a complete shift in what my day-to-day was. And now I'm inside of a house. I want to engage people. I don't know how. I don't really know how to be helpful yet because I don't know what this really is.
Right.
And you start to go through layers of concern. I had my community's concern, I had my personal concern, but I think what kept me up at night most, besides the sound of ambulances going up and down my neighborhood, was at that point, we knew that it was the greatest threat to the elderly and seniors. And what kept me up most was really thinking about my mom and my dad and some of
Right.
the more senior people of my family, to be quite honest with you. And I felt all the very same things that the doctor had mentioned, which I couldn't fall asleep. I'd wake up at like randomly at 3:17 in the morning. I would just think about things and try to process it. So that was my mental health at the time.
Wow. Wow. No, I mean, 100%. I completely get it. And it was very similar to me, being the husband to a doctor, right? Like Dr. Charles, having to look at it from that perspective, and watching my wife go through, very similar things that, Dr. Charles talked about was very difficult for me. In addition to, losing a staff member really early and being the last person on the phone with him before he passed, right? So the trauma around that, was really tough for me. And one of the things, and going into our second question, one of the things that I ended up having to realize is I never really knew how to mourn, right? I never had the time to mourn losses because I was always active. So, also as a musician, I would play. I've been playing at funerals since I was 14, 15 years old. So I didn't even realize that funerals were a thing for me. I can do 8 to 12 funerals a year. People I don't know, people I do know. So it was just okay, funeral, playing the piano in the funerals. And then if it's a Haitian funeral, going downstairs to help with the repast, right? Going to get the food, the families that came over, all that stuff. So COVID made it that I couldn't go play piano for no. I couldn't go to any funerals. I couldn't go to any repasses. I just had to stay home, and I couldn't leave. So here I am stuck with the emotions of the loss. And now I'm doing something that I've never done before where I'm just stuck here. My wife is out there saving lives. I can't do anything and I'm feeling sad and painful and hurt. So my question to the both of you, and we'll start with you, Josh, is how did you mourn, right? If you lost someone personal or if you heard about someone, all these lives that were being lost, what was your coping mechanism and how did you mourn this?
It was pretty difficult because it felt like it went from levels of reality, right? You had the first loss where you're like, oh my God, somebody we know died. This is real. Then you
Right.
had the second loss, and it was like, oh wow, two people back to back. By the time you get to the third, fourth, and fifth loss, it just becomes surreal. Like, and it does have that. I felt like it had an impact on not just me personally, but people around me, where people really started to become paranoid. Where it really was like, how can this be happening? And what now? People are really asking, what is the scale of this, and how soon before it's super close to me, like a
Right.
member, etc. How did it was really hard to mourn. I think there are different ways that people mourn. It happened so back to back that there was not the opportunity to mourn. And even now, some of the people that I lost during that period, which is still ongoing, and it's still like, wow, I can't believe this member of my church passed away, and I never got to see him. I never got to say goodbye. So it's almost we're still mourning.
Right. Right. Dr. Jen?
I think this is a great opportunity to talk about how Haitian people mourn or lack thereof.
Right.
I think growing up in a Haitian household, you're kind of like discouraged to mourn or to cry or to stay in a very sad state. It's basically, you acknowledge the death and you're basically taught to move on with your life. I remember going to a funeral very, very early in my life, and my family members were telling me, don't cry. And it's something that Haitian people, I don't know if it's something that you guys do
Right.
in your households, but I feel
especially
like
the men, especially men,
it's
especially
like,
Haitian men.
don't cry. But I think for me, it's important to allow myself to grieve, cry about the situation or cry about the loss of the life. But also, it's very important to remember the good moments that you had with that particular person,
Right.
and to try to stay in contact with that particular person's loved ones and to see if there's any way that you can help. I remember at my particular institution, one of the first people that I know that passed away was a nurse practitioner that I was very close to. And she was only 45 years old. She had 4 children that she left behind. But around this time, we were allowed to go to the funeral. It was limited capacity. And just being able to, I guess, see the nurse, who was my friend at the time, just to see her and acknowledge that she did pass away and see the family members and contribute what I could was very helpful in that particular healing process. But I think as a Haitian woman overall, we're kind of taught to just accept it and just move on with your life, which is kind of unhealthy in a way, right? It's very unhealthy. Or you're told not to cry, like you're not supposed to cry.
Right. You know what's funny? There apparently seems to be two groups when it comes to whether to cry or not to cry in our culture, right? So I'm part of the I'm gonna do whatever I have to do not to cry part of the culture, but it's like every funeral that I've been to is not only are we gonna cry,
we're gonna throw ourselves into the thing.
It's the casket, right?
And throw yourself on the casket, roule à terre, bagay comme ça. And
that's how you basically get it out.
Yeah, just let it. And when I, the first time I experienced that, I was in my early 20s, and it was just like, oh, this is too much. Like, I don't. But I feel like because I was part of the don't cry part of the culture and not part of the just let it all out, I suffered through the mourning process much longer than my cousin would, dip onto the floor and have that process where they just let it all out. So, everybody, to different strokes for everyone else.
Different folks. No, absolutely. No, and it's interesting because there's the third part, Josh, where it's like, hey, Montant Intel is gonna try to jump into the thing. So let's be right there so we can catch her before she tries to jump into the hole where the thing is going down and then we got to talk about the fourth part of the culture where Jennifer Pamete got rouge, no? You can't sing this song, you can't eat this food. You can't sleep. If that's your husband, you can't go to the burial because he won't let you sleep. Like,
or yes, these are things. Yes, or if the wife loses the husband, they're not allowed to go because they won't get married again.
Exactly.
Wow, in the Asian community. But I think, like you said, I like the way you explain that. There is 2 parts. It's the don't cry. I guess beforehand, but when you arrive to the funeral, I guess you can cry there. But after that, there's like no more crying.
Right. Right. So I guess the third question now becomes: so how do we, for members that are watching, that are members of the communities that we're discussing, what resources or what coping mechanisms have you guys used that maybe can be helpful to them, right? One of the things that Dr. Jeff always talked to us about was, it's not enough to talk about counseling, right? You have to take the next step and talk about your experience in counseling, right? So that someone close to you can have a realistic picture in their mind of what it looks like for someone they know or someone they trust or there's someone that they're close to actually going to counseling so that they can put themselves in that scenario. Because a lot of times you hear, oh, go to counseling. But then sometimes the people who are saying that, they don't even go to counseling, right? So that person is like, wait, what? So what does that look like? How does that work? Am I sitting on a couch and a complete stranger? I'm telling them my business, X, Y, and Z. So I'm not saying that you guys are saying that that's the answer. I'm saying I used counseling for myself. That was the answer for me. But also, my question basically is, what are some resources or coping mechanisms that you guys use? And I'll start with you, Dr. Charles, to deal with the different things that you were going through during COVID-19?
Oh, okay. Well, during COVID-19, I talked to lots of family members because at that time, I can circle back a little bit. Doctor, I don't know if I can say this. Is this like, I don't know if it's a HIPAA violation, but Dr. Jeff Kadir used to be my counselor at one point.
Oh, look at that.
Like 4 years ago. I used to go to him consistently, but I moved to Jersey, so we kind of like lost communication. But during COVID, I found myself really appreciating my girlfriends used to do a lot of Zooms. I think like every Friday we would have a Zoom just to catch up. With things that were going on outside of, I guess, COVID-19, just try to catch up on personal things and kind of just in a way pretend like COVID wasn't happening in a way, just trying to, because it was in our face like 24/7. So I really appreciated like our Zoom calls or cocktail nights, because we would talk about things that were going on in our lives and outside of COVID-19. I think that's the way that I kind of dealt with it, was just having conversations, because I'm an anesthesiologist. So we're talking about COVID-19 all day. So when I'm talking to my girlfriends, I did not want to talk about COVID-19. Right. Even if I was at work and we had our Zoom calls, I was not talking about patient cases because that was just my escape from it,
Got it. Josh, what about you?
Whenever I'm going through a stressful situation or something like that, you do try for a level of normalcy and bring that normalcy back to your life. For me, it was really getting to the point where we understood that, okay, these are the precautions you have to take. People were wearing gloves at the times and masks and constantly using hand sanitizer.
Right.
The thing that helped me the most cope was when I was actually able to get out of and be able to go back into the community, but in a very limited way. And it was, we took a trip to go visit a facility where we were able to get a ventilator, and there was a shortage of ventilators at the time, get that ventilator out of a private facility and take it to one of the hospitals. And I can still remember how there was a part of me that going into that facility, being around other people, it was kind of like do. But there was also this part where I was like, oh my, yes, I'm out. Like, I just felt it was like one type of stress in exchange for another. And I dealt with the indoor stress of not being able to do what I know so much that I was like, I'll take that other stress of like, maybe I might catch COVID, but if I don't, I've liberated myself a little bit. So yeah, that's how I dealt with it.
No, that's huge. That's huge. And I'm very happy, that we all were able to make it, right? Because that became another reality of, the fact that there were people who were asymptomatic, who had it and they didn't know they had it. So there was this almost mind game, right? Well, do I have it? Am I asymptomatic? And there was no vaccine yet. So it was like, okay, how do you solve this? And a lot of that could be very, very stressful. So no, you guys made some great points on what people were going through, especially in the Haitian community. So what's
the answer? What did you do? What did you do?
Oh, so I did. So I got back into therapy because I wasn't sure because the therapy offices were closed. So yeah, so went to the Zoom and at first I was anti. I'm gonna be honest. I was anti Zoom because I was like, oh, it's gonna be so impersonal. It's not gonna be the same. But I really pushed through it when I lost my godfather. Like that's when it was really. I was like, okay, I gotta speak to somebody, about this because I was with him in the hospital on Friday night. Sorry, on Friday night I was with him in the hospital. He passed on Sunday, and I spoke to him, and he was telling me, and he just went in for he didn't die. He didn't pass from COVID. He passed for he had a heart procedure that he told me it was a little procedure, right? Haitians, right? Haitians. Oh, Tiba, my fella. He didn't even tell me it was a heart procedure. He just said they said I gotta do something. It'll be quick. It's gonna be an hour. We'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Never came out. It never came back. Right. So that was really hard for me because we were at Brooklyn Chop House that Friday night, and that's when he had like a semi like heart attack.
Mm.
And then that's what brought us to the hospital. So I was in the ambulance with him and everything. And the whole time he was like, I'm good, I'm all right, I'm gonna be okay. So when after he passed on that I think it was Sunday, I was not good, right? And I'm thankful to have such a huge network of people that checked up on me, called me, made sure I was okay. But it really was a therapy and music that really got me through it. Music therapy. That's and going to my corner and playing the piano and just like letting it all out and crying my eyes out. But the therapy really, really helped. So like to that point, what steps can healthcare professionals, right? Because like you, Dr. Charles, you're a healthcare professional, so there's
Yeah.
an expectation for you to always be on,
Yeah.
right? Like I call anesthesiologists mini gods because you guys take life and give it back. You know what I mean? So like what like you
My
always have to be on.
We always are on, but let me tell you, I love my cousin. I don't know if she's going to be watching this, but I have a cousin named Lisa, and she's always telling me, not always, but periodically, she's like, I'm taking a mental health day today.
Nice.
And we do the same thing. I feel like it is okay. There's a culture, like in medicine, for you to never call out. Like you can never be sick. And it's not really spoken, it's not really talked about. But lately, I've been finding myself, if I just need a day to regroup, I will call out of work and I will go to the spa and I will relax and
Nice.
I will watch a movie,
Nice.
right? Because outside of being an anesthesiologist, I'm a mom. I have a 3-year-old. I take care of family members and I do a lot, So some days I'm just like, you know what? I'm gonna take a mental health day. I'm gonna take a Jennifer day, and I'm gonna do things that are gonna make Jennifer happy. It's not often, obviously, but it's okay to like turn it down. You don't always have to be on 1,000,
Right. No, that's phenomenal.
And also, like you said, therapy. I call her my life coach.
Nice. Right. And I think that's very important. Josh, as an elected official, right? People look to you to solve their problems. Like, a pandemic occurs. Same thing with Dr. Charles. People are looking to her. I can't imagine how many text messages she's gotten from friends and family. Hey, answer this question. What does this mean? Like, what's going on? You sleeping? Jennifer leve. Right? All day long. Then you got the Google doctor wannabes, right? They went to Google, they read something, kunyala, now they want to come and bother you, Dr. Charles.
It's my job though. I answer every question with pride,
Right. So Josh, to you as an elected official, right? People were depending on you to do something out of nowhere. What are the elected officials doing? Like,
Yes.
what are you guys doing for the community? How come you're not doing mass giveaways? Where is this? Where is that? So how did you, deal with that? And, what were some resources that you used for yourself dealing with all that stress?
So, interestingly enough, in the beginning, everybody felt like the most important thing to do was to stay indoors to stop the spread and stop everything going. So, I would say, particularly in the Flatbush, Brooklyn area, people were very patient about it. If you were caught outside, they would shame you for being outside to begin with. Once we started to understand these are the things, these are the steps that need to be taken to protect ourselves, it then became for us as leaders in the community, how do we ensure that members of our community who are mainly working class and might not have all these resources have the things they needed? How do we make sure that they had gloves that were a big deal at the time, less so now? Masks continue to be a major thing, and there were shortages of masks everywhere, and hand sanitizer. So at some point, we were able to start distributing, getting those things from the city and the state and distributing them to local community members. The other thing that was trying to get information to people that it clears the clutter that they hear on their day-to-day. We did try to get as much information as possible from the state, and we would send out email blasts often as we could, maybe not daily, but once or twice a week, to inform people this is where you can get these resources. These are the precautions that need to be taken, etc. So those were the ways that we stepped in to help. But talking about mental health, I think that a lot of work has to be done to destigmatize the need to do mental health in Black communities in particular. And on top of that, a lot of investment has to be made in building a mental health pipeline. Built similarly to, but not having the same negative effect as the way they build the prison pipeline. And the way you do that is you start the concept of mental health in early childhood, from elementary to middle school to high school. So by the time the kid graduates, they're used to going to a counselor. They understand themselves better. And we have been able to identify some of the behavioral issues that would prevent them from succeeding both academically and as full-grown adults.
Wow, Josh, you sound like a guy who might potentially be running for a higher office or something, man, with all those talking points there, man. Like, I don't know, you know, but yeah, I think that was very good. And I think the both of you really, you guys really laid out, you know, what some of the issues were that you guys dealt with personally and the community as well. HAC, we actually, one of the things that I ended up doing, which wasn't the most healthiest, but that was my coping mechanism, was to go out there and get involved, right? So I started making phone calls to some of my colleagues, and you know, why don't we have a coping testing center in the Haitian community? So called the governor's office, called my friends over there, and you know, we was on the phones and working it, and we were able to get a coping testing center in Flatbush, in your district, Josh, over in the Sears parking lot, and HAC handled all the logistics to make that happen, and it was a lot. But I think in getting the COVID testing center off the ground in Flatbush, so that, you know, Haitian people could, and all Caribbean folks could go there, it was soothing for me to know that even though I was stuck home in the dungeon, but we were still able to provide a space for people that needed to get COVID testing out there as well. And I think that, I'm saying all that to you know, to bring us to our last and final question. I think, you know, being active in the community, having conversations, speaking to people. Dr. Charles, you're a doctor, so you're able to give advice. Josh, you're an elected official, so you're able to put policies in place and work with different community organizations to provide resources for the community. You know, so how would you tell your friends right now, like, well, you know, and I'm glad that Josh mentioned the destigmatization. So how do we destigmatize the fact that, you know, in the Haitian community specifically, but how do we start to knock the chips off little by little to get our community to become healthier mentally?
Well, I think it starts off with conversations like this, where you're Haitian, I'm Haitian, nous parlons créole, nous voulons, etc. Where people can see people who look like them, people who are of their culture, having a discussion about it. They'll receive that, and once they receive that, it opens up a greater conversation where it's like, bon, why can't I go to a mental health doctor? And then just knowing that there are other people who are just like you who are taking this step opens up that possibility for a lot of people. And we as leaders and members of the community have to be honest about our own mental health situation. I think I've yet to meet somebody that I felt had it so much together that they didn't need any type of mental health of any sort. So we as leaders probably have to come out about the fact that we have mental health needs as well.
Very good. Dr. Charles?
I think I'll give a personal example. I have a younger brother I think he's like 15 years old now. And approximately 4 years ago, we shared the same father. Our father passed away. And I started noticing, or teachers started noticing, that he started falling behind in his schoolwork. He stopped attending class. And it wasn't like he was going out to play with his friends or doing anything like a typical teenager, like skipping school or not going to class because he wanted to hang out. He basically became very introverted, right? So he stopped performing well in school. He stopped going to class. He didn't have a lot of friends. And I just started recognizing, I'm like, this looks like signs of depression.
Right.
And being Haitian, it took forever to get his mother on board. And I basically just had to identify and get the teachers on board to say, this is abnormal. He used to do really, really well in school. And here's an event that basically changed the trajectory of his life, you know, and it was really, really traumatic for him. But again, being Haitian, she just didn't understand what depression was. And it's unfortunate, and it was a really unfortunate, but I'm grateful after a lot of harassment in identifying and just showing her, right? I had to basically open her eyes to what was happening to my little brother, was that he was just sinking into a very deep depression. So fortunately in New Jersey, there's something called Perform Care that the school, so if you're at home and you're watching, you're having issues with your own children or siblings, Perform Care is a 24-hour kind of like a crisis center that you call hotline, and they actually came out to the house and they gave him an evaluation and hooked him up with a therapist since recently, not since then. Maybe I want to say this started back in October.
Nice.
So it took a very, very long time, because then, like you said, it's like, you know, in the Haitian culture, we don't believe in depression or anxiety. It's like, oh, you don't have anything wrong with you, but people could really be struggling. In the way that you can see this is sleeping patterns, work. Are you working as well as you used to? And are you performing like you used to perform? Just pointing these things out, I think is really, really important.
No, absolutely.
Can I also add, Sam? You just said something that triggered a whole bunch of thoughts in my head. There's nothing wrong with them. The language that we use, like, how do you say somebody has a mental health issue? Like, you can't help their head is no good. If that's the
thing,
that they have a mental health issue, or lifu. Those are we have to just expand the language such that we can more comfortably accept what the situation is and speak about it in a more appropriate way.
No, you just said something deep there, Josh, because that's what people do. Like, if someone is doing something that's abnormal, that's what we do in Creole. And we do signals too. Like if I wanted a signal to you that Dr. Charles was saying something abnormal, the signal would be, which is horrible, right? Which is horrible. And nobody wants to feel like that. Nobody wants to be, known as the person who's not okay or being pointed the finger at. So this is good. And I think this will be great for our part 2, for us to continue to talk about, how can we destigmatize counseling and the language around how we communicate the problems that people have, and expand the language, right? Exactly. Expand the language in our Haitian Creole. And I think this would be a great show for our HAC radio, that I'm really excited that we're going to be expanding and having an all Creole program for the Creole speakers out there. Well, wow, what a great conversation. Dr. Charles, Councilmember Pierre, I am super ecstatic about this conversation that we had. I'm so happy that I was able to partake and take place in this. And I think this is great. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're out there watching, please feel free to join HAC. On the bottom of the screen, you can go to our website, www.hacglobal.org/join, and you can become a part of our network. We have so many valuable resources that we provide the Haitian community, and you will have access to all of that and all of our programs by becoming a member today. We want to really thank Dr. Jennifer Charles and State Committeeman Josue Pierre for your time with us today. We really appreciate it. You could be anywhere else, but you were here today with HAC here on HAC TV. We want to thank our sponsors, PayPal and EEP Law. Again, if you have any legal issues, whether it's civil rights or personal injury, feel free to reach out to EEP Law, www.eeplaw.com. It will be rolling across the screen here. And EEP is our official legal sponsor, and they have been phenomenal to HAC. You have representation. EEP is there for us. So we're really, really excited. I'm excited for part 2. And I think this is great. You've been watching HAC TV. This is our Civic Engagement Program that we have every Saturday. COVID is not going to stop us from bringing valuable program to you and your community. Please go on our YouTube and subscribe so that you can get an alarm every time our program comes out. Dr. Charles, State Committeeman Pierre, any last quick words before we go?
Well, if you need any help with mental health, you can always call. If you have insurance, call your insurance company and they can give you a list of psychiatrists and psychologists that are in network that you can contact.
Wonderful. No, that's great. Phenomenal. And Josh?
Yeah, mental health is an individualized thing, but it's also a group thing. Any resources you have, if you had the experience of having counseling, it's good to share and discuss it with people and encourage them to get mental health checkups as well.
Absolutely. So right now in our chats, you will see that we have some resources that we're putting on, and on the bottom of the screen here, we have resources that are available for folks who need help with mental health in New York City and in New York State. So please, on the bottom of the screen here, you will see phone numbers and email addresses where you, as a New York City resident, you can get some help. And also, if you're a resident from anywhere else, we have some federal contacts that are going to be rolling across the screen for you to click on and speak to as well. Once again, thank you so much for joining HAC TV. My name is Sam Pierre. I'm the Executive Director of the Haitian American Caucus. We are excited. Thank you for joining. I just want to say thank you to my team, our amazing production team that puts this together. Lee Almonacé, who is our production guru, and Elisha Pierre, who is the operations director here at the Haitian American Caucus. We want to thank you and all the HAC staff in Haiti as well as here in the U.S. Thank you so much for watching. We love you, and stay tuned for HAC TV. Thank you very much and have a wonderful afternoon.
Every life has worth beyond measure.
Within each person is a flood of potential
waiting to be unleashed.
What if every child,
every woman,
and every man was able to imagine something new,
full of hope,
new dreams, and the ability to choose their own future? A new way of seeing the world,
the community,
themselves.
Pushing past the obstacles that once were. And when the world yells, you cannot.
We will keep whispering, yes, you can. Together we can make a difference.
Together we are stronger.
Able to move mountains and break the chains of poverty.
Haitian American Caucus, strengthening Haiti through
education, health,
feeding programs.
micro enterprise.
We are Haiti.
We are HAC.